Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. This gentleman offers so much insight when it comes to our children. He's worked with them for many years as a district psychologist at Reed Union School District in California. And a lot of questions today, people checking in, questions about their kids, psychology and such. If you want to reach out, instant feedback, Steve at gmail.com. This is Good Advice Helps with Dr. Allan Gold. Welcome back, Allan. How are you doing today?
Okay, thank you, Steve. How are you?
I'm very well, and it popped this in my head that many times in school districts, there are psychologists within the different schools in the district. You were a district psychologist in the Reed Union School District. Does that mean that you worked with many different schools, many different ages?
Yes, indeed. I worked for a relatively small school district. It was a K-8, or is a K-8 school district. And the schools were, since about the 80s, were divided into a K-2 school, kindergarten to second grade, and that school now has pre-K or TK students as well. And then a grades 3 to 5 school, and then a grades 6 to 8 school. So I would watch kids grow up, and I would work with them for, sometimes 9 years. I gave up the little kids when the population was growing, and I couldn't handle everybody. But I would be generally during the day for 1 to 2 days a week. So I could interact with kids of all ages, and I had the benefit of knowing who they were, so when they moved on to the next grade, I could work with the teachers on, sharing information about the kids, and always keeping that positive attitude that, yes, kids grow up and they mature, and maybe the problems they were having the year before might get resolved. But yes, I did work. Now, in large school districts, sometimes school psychologists they're often assigned to more than one school, so they may have, that's usually the process.
Wow. You've seen it all from all different ages, all different viewpoints and perspective. Let's get to Mandy from Dallas. She checks in at instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com, says, I'm planning a career in psychology. I love children. Can you tell me what courses outside of psychological classes might be beneficial?
Okay, very good. I would say that depending on what the school psychology program is, you're going to learn about child development, cognitive and physical, emotional development. That's important to have courses on consultation, actually, because if you decide to be a school psychologist, there's a lot of interaction with parents, with teachers who may ask questions, and to know how to consult with them is a very, very important skill. I think neuropsychology is important. Now, I wasn't trained in that back in the day. This was 50 years ago. But I think it's really important to understand what the brain is actually doing, and particularly medications that can be given to kids, whether it's for attention deficit disorder, what may be causing learning disabilities, emotional disturbances, and so on. So the neuropsychology is really an important course to take. I think also counseling. Not all school psychology programs give a lot of education. Program may do that because that's a lot of what you spend your time doing is counseling kids, learning how to do group counseling, individual counseling. I think it's important also to understand different cultures. Because depending on where you're working, there may be minority cultures, and to really understand how to work with kids who are different than you are, and to understand parent involvement, to understand racism, to understand even things like social interaction, like I think there's a term for it, proximal, how close you stand to somebody, eye contact. Not all cultures are the same, have the same standards average Americans do. Some cultures, kids will look down and not at you. They may stand closer to you. They may stand further away from you. So there's plenty of courses that can be helpful in understanding as many different children and groups of children as possible. It's also law is another major piece. You have to know what the special education laws are, Section 504, which is part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that's absolutely important to have knowledge of the legal procedures, what to do to avoid being sued. How do you do that? And sometimes that's unavoidable. Parents may just feel that the school is not meeting the child's needs and be litigious about it. So that's important. And then kind of organizational psychology too, understanding how a school really functions. Who's the boss, the superintendent of schools, the school board, principals. How to work with making changes, because changes are often important, and all of those people are not necessarily educators, or they haven't been teachers, and so just to understand how the organizational system works is another important course to take.
Now, you mentioned, Allan, a moment ago about the consultation aspect. Tell us a little bit more about that. I just want to make sure I understand that clear.
Yes. Okay. So that in my program at the University of California at Berkeley, that was an extremely important skill to be taught. So what I mean by that is, when somebody brings up a problem, it's sort of an American impulse to just tell them what to do. We like to give answers, we like to give advice, but that's not always the best approach. So by being a good consultant, and parents need to learn that too. I've often talked about how parents have two major roles. One is manager and the other is consultant. And when kids are little, the parent is the manager. They know who they're playing with. They tell them what to do. They see them all the time. And, they can manage what they wear and what they eat and all that sort of thing. As they get older, starting probably 8 or 9 or 10, parents don't have to be the managers anymore. They can be consultants. And I think the biggest area for being a consultant with a young person is with their social issues. When kids are very little, if they're having trouble, the parents can call other parents and so on. But by the time they get in 3rd or 4th grade, they want to learn to handle these social issues themselves. So it's a good example of how consultation actually works. So if a kid brings up a problem, if a parent brings up a problem, you just start by asking a lot of questions, and you to try to understand what's really going on. And so first step is asking questions. Then trying to figure out what the person bringing up the problem really wants. Like with kids, often I would say, do you really want some advice about handling this, or do you just want to vent? And sometimes kids and adults just want to get it off their chest. They're just feeling overburdened, and they just want somebody to talk about it and not necessarily ask for the solution. But if they really do want some advice about how to handle a difficult situation, then you brainstorm. So another step in the consultation process is brainstorming. Well, let's think of some ideas about how we could handle this. For example, if I was presented with a social problem by a kid, and I would say, okay, you want to try to solve this? Okay, well, let's think of some ways we could do that. And I would suggest, kids aren't always good at coming up with a lot of different varieties, but so you may end up offering, adults are probably better at doing that. But you may offer, I could meet with this other kid and talk to him or her about what's going on. I could meet with the two of you together or the three of you together, or you might handle it yourself, and let's talk about ways that you could address this issue with this other kid. And we would talk about ways to express the concern in a respectful but clear way. And with adults, again, how do we want to handle this situation? Like a kid with ADHD. Do you want to try a contract? Do you want to help with your doctor? Do you want to consider medication? Do you need much more research and information before you make a decision? So, and with teachers, that was the primary reason. What does the teacher want from you? Do you want me to? How do you want me to handle what you're dealing with this child? Do you want some ideas about how you can handle it yourself? Do you want me to see the child? Do you think this child needs an assessment? But all of that is, here I'm the one that's talking, but this is a mutual dialogue where the consultee is invited as much as possible to make suggestions for what they might want to do or what they feel comfortable doing, and so on. And then as you decide, if you're brainstorming, it's okay, well, which one do you think would be the best chance of making a difference? And let's try it, and give it a try for a week or two, and then let's meet again and see how that evaluate how well the intervention has worked. And if not, then we'll continue to consult on it and try to find something else.
I have to imagine in your career when working with children, by the way, we're going to get to another email, this one from a parent in just a moment, but I have to imagine along the way, you had to either be trained or train yourself to listen, not only with your ears, but with your eyes, to pick up on cues and things like that. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. Because all of us, whether kid or adult, communicate so much more with our nonverbal facial expressions. We could say one thing, but our face is saying the exact opposite. So, yes, it's so important to learn how to do that. And I'm trying to remember now if we were taught how to do that. I certainly learned better how to do that. And then listening and looking is super important. If a kid looks uncomfortable or sad or scared or angry, you can pick that up with their expressions. And I used to teach kids in social skills groups, because that's a very important social skill, is to be able to read nonverbal cues. And I used to do little exercises where a kid would, I'd show them a little card with like a flashcard with a emotion written on it, and to see if they could use nonverbal cues to express that emotion, and see if the other kids in the group could figure out what the kid was expressing. And sometimes it would be very subtle, like what does annoyance look like? What does anger look like? What does furious look like? And to see if they could make those distinctions. So yes, it's absolutely important, and I had to learn how to do that myself.
Yeah, I think it's like they say, listen with your eyes.
Yes, exactly.
Let's go to Jake, who checks in from Peoria, Illinois. Instant feedback, Steve@gmail.com. He says, my daughter is 12 and has a boyfriend. And I'm just going to add in here because you can't see it, but boyfriend is in quotation marks. They've been spending more and more time together. I'm concerned the relationship will start to get in the way of school and other activities. I'm not sure how to handle this. Do you have any advice?
Okay. And that's not so unusual. Frankly, parents can be scared that they'll start being sexual. I don't know if that's the case here, but
I'm sure it's on Jake's radar.
Yes, it's on the radar, and I've certainly dealt with that. Fortunately, not very often, but with middle school kids. So I think it's important to have very serious discussions with his. You said it's his daughter.
Yeah, she's 12.
Yeah. To make sure she knows about sexuality and protection and all of that. Because if she has a boyfriend, it's normal to experiment. You don't want to leave them too unsupervised, and that's tricky. If they're, and I think they should probably contact the other parents just to make sure that both sets of parents are, aware of what's going on. They will probably find ways to be alone. I mean, that's, 12-year-olds are pretty clever. And, but I think they need to be aware of what the temptations are, what the concerns are. Hopefully, the parents have good communication with the daughter. So to talk about it and say, I'm glad you're found somebody that you like. To see if she'll even answer some of these questions, like what do you two like to do together? What do you have in common? And then if they're open enough. So how would you handle it, daughter, if the boyfriend tried to touch you? And how would you feel about that? And it's very hard for parents to have these discussions with kids that age. But I think if they practiced themselves, if mom and dad practiced, I don't know if parents are together or divorced, but I think to be able to address not in an angry way, not in an over anxious way, but just in a very kind of direct and curious way, and then how would you handle it if you didn't feel comfortable with the boyfriend touching you, and how would you handle that? Or if maybe you do want to do that, but and who knows if the kid's smoking pot or drinking, because in those kind of situations, it's much more easy to be seduced and all of that. So, I mean, it's an excellent question, and I feel for parents of kids that age, because, and sometimes they just will end up experimenting. And so parents have to kind of accept that that's not so abnormal, but, and they have to also express their own values. I don't want you pregnant. you're not old enough to raise a child yet. Is that something you would want to do at this point? So can you hug each other if you really like each other? Maybe even kiss each other. I'm being very direct here, but at 12 years old, they need to know how to protect themselves. I can talk about. I don't know if the school where this child went does anything with what's called family life education or sex education. Most, like our school, started that in 5th grade, where you learn how babies are formed and puberty and all of that. So the girl may have her period already, so they've had to talk about that. So it's all about communication, really. And if the parents are concerned and worried, on the one hand, they want to say, yeah, I'm really glad you have a boyfriend. It's good practice for learning what's important in a relationship. But you also have to know how to protect yourself.
I love the fact that you flip it around and ask questions or suggest to ask questions of the student and or child, as opposed to dictating or dispensing advice.
Yes.
I think that's fantastic and a great reminder for parents. We don't think of stuff like that.
Yeah, because the natural urge for a parent is to tell a kid what to do.
Yep.
And I think that being able to ask questions is, and I think that was one thing that really helped kids feel like I cared about them, and I'm sure adults as well. Because if you show interest by asking and wanting to understand exactly what a parent is feeling, or a kid is feeling, or a teacher is feeling, yes, the whole thing about asking questions is really, really a crucial skill.
It's, as a parent, I never want to go back to it, but it does come up. It's like you want your kid to know that you've been there. Yes, you didn't live the life they lived. That we got that because nobody can walk in somebody else's shoes. Right. But a lot of the things that kids or your children think about, you thought about. And it's a delicate balance because you don't want to be the parent who is perceived to be, well, when I was your age, I used to.
Yes, right.
It's tough.
No, it's true, and it is a delicate balance because if you, if it's relevant and you can share something about how you handled a similar situation, and don't feel like you're going to be put in a box or interrogated. Mm-hmm. It may be useful. When I was 12, I really liked this boy too, and so I understand what you're saying, and but these are some of the things that I thought about. Now you may be different, but just so you know, I experience the same thing too.
Yeah.
Now, whether, a parent is obligated to answer every question that a kid asks, some parents that I worked with did. Many parents didn't. Like, did you smoke pot when you were a kid? Or something. The parents have a right to privacy in the same way that kids have a right to privacy. So, it all gets down to the communication skills that both kids and parents have. The luckiest parents are those that their kids trust them and they're willing to share information and ask their own questions. And again, another piece of this is to really build that relationship with other parents because I've said it before. At this age, kids will tell their friends what's going on, but they won't tell their parents. And if that friend tells his or her parents, then that information is there and should be shared. I mean, I've had to do that. I've gotten information from one parent about another 12-year-old having sex, and I had to make a very uncomfortable call about, I need to tell you this. I'm not sure it's true, but I want you to be aware. But the communication, if a kid feels like, yeah, I can trust my parent to listen to me, and not just boss me around and be over-controlling and tell me what to do, because I'm really not sure of how to handle this situation, that's an ideal relationship between a kid and a parent. Unfortunately, a lot of them aren't that way, but it's something that parents of young kids can build over the years, and that's what's so important. If that trust is there from the time a kid is little, then when they're teenagers, they may in fact still be willing to share information. And parents just need to say, being an adolescent it's really challenging, and I'm here to support you and help you figure out some of these things. And if you really are confused about how to handle something, I do have experience. Just ask, and we'll talk about it. And I'm not going to get mad at you.
It's the classic delicate blend between being your child's parent, but also being their friend. You have to have the right kind of balance there.
Yeah, or being the consultant. That's what you really want, is to consult with your adolescent kids so you can help them solve their own problems.
I never thought of it that way. Using that word, being a consultant, because
it's a little different than friend, because I don't think parents should be friends, because then they they'll do anything just to make sure their kids like them,
right?
And so they don't discipline when they need to be doing that. So that's why I like the consultant term.
Oh, that's a nugget of valuable information times a million right there. Because think about in business over the years where we had consultants. You're going to open a store. You go consult somebody, to do the research, to get their advice. And you're my consultant on these topics. Good. Yeah. Allan, always great having you on here. Really appreciate it. Anybody's got any questions about the field of school psychology, or even if you're a parent, i.e. consultant, got a question, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. Appreciate it as always. And thanks again for being here, Allan.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed doing this.
Same. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind, like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind, like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ed Council.